The unexpected invasion. The sky was clear that day. The sun was shining brightly, and Earth's people went about their daily lives without a care in the world. But everything changed in the blink of an eye. No one expected the sudden darkness that would soon blanket the planet. It all started with a strange tremor in the ground, followed by a loud, high-pitched noise in the air. People looked up, confusion spreading across their faces. They saw something massive, streaking across the sky. At first, it was just a speck in the distance, but as it grew closer, the speck turned into an enormous shape. Metal glinted in the sunlight. Then, it happened. The first alien ship broke through the clouds, descending at incredible speed. It was only the beginning. Dozens of ships followed in its wake, like a swarm of locusts descending on a field. Panic spread across the cities. People ran, their faces filled with fear, but there was nowhere to hide. The invaders were here. The aliens had come. They were no longer just a theory in the minds of scientists or a story in science fiction books. They were real, and they were terrifying. They came from a distant galaxy, far beyond the reach of any human's imagination. Their ships were unlike anything Earth had ever seen, sleek, dark, and armed with weapons that could level entire cities with ease. Earth's defenses, primitive by comparison, stood little chance against the alien onslaught. The people of Earth didn't know who these invaders were or where they came from. They didn't know what their purpose was, but one thing was clear: these aliens wanted Earth, and they wanted it badly. As the ships continued their descent, the aliens deployed their ground forces. Alien soldiers clad in shining armor, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. They marched across the land, destroying everything in their path. Cities that once stood tall, filled with the bustling lives of humans, were now nothing more than rubble. The aliens showed no mercy. They wiped out military bases, toppled governments, and began rounding up the survivors. It seemed as though Earth had no chance. They were too powerful, too advanced. There was no way to stop them, or so everyone thought. As the alien forces began to establish their foothold on the planet, Earth's leaders were thrown into a state of shock. The world had never faced anything like this before. There was no plan, no defense strong enough to fight back against such an overwhelming force. The military scrambled to organize a counterattack, but the aliens' superior technology made every effort feel like a losing battle. For the first time in history, Earth's defenses were completely outmatched. But just as it seemed like all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. As the aliens began their systematic conquest, they failed to notice one crucial detail. Humanity's strength was not in their technology. It was in their ability to adapt, survive, and fight back with a ferocity that no one could predict. The aliens believed that conquering Earth would be easy. After all, humans were still young in the grand scale of the universe. They had just begun to explore the stars, and their technology was far behind that of the advanced alien forces. The invaders assumed that Earth was a primitive, unimportant planet, ripe for the taking. They were wrong. As the invasion began, there were no grand speeches or heroic leaders. No one stood up and declared that they would defend Earth. Instead, it was the people themselves, ordinary humans, who began to rise up. Soldiers and civilians alike. They fought back with everything they had. They used whatever weapons they could find, from simple handguns to makeshift explosives. They didn't have advanced technology like the aliens, but they had something else: determination. The first major clash between the aliens and humans took place in a small city, far from the major battlefields. The aliens had already established a base there, and their forces were scattered throughout the area. They didn't expect any real resistance. After all, humans were weak compared to the aliens. But that's when they learned their first lesson. Humanity was anything but weak. It was an unexpected group of survivors, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and civilians who banded together to launch a surprise attack. They used their knowledge of the city, their ability to adapt on the fly, and their sheer will to push the aliens back. The aliens were taken by surprise. They didn't understand how humans could fight back so fiercely with such limited resources. It was a small victory, but it was enough to send a message. Earth would not go down without a fight. As the alien forces regrouped and tried to plan their next move, Earth's military began to coordinate a defense. But it was no longer just about military might. It was about the humans' resilience. They didn't need advanced technology to fight. They needed each other. People who had never picked up a weapon before were now learning how to defend their homes. Teachers, doctors, and students all became soldiers. The invaders had underestimated humanity, and they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The aliens had come with their high-tech weapons, ready to crush Earth's defenses with ease. But they had failed to recognize the power of the human spirit, the power of people coming together in the face of destruction. And that was the mistake that would cost them everything. The battle for Earth was only just beginning, and the aliens were about to face a force they had never anticipated: the relentless will of humanity. The chaos continued as the alien forces advanced, spreading terror and destruction wherever they went. Cities burned, entire neighborhoods were wiped off the map, and the once peaceful world was plunged into a brutal war. It seemed like all hope was lost. The aliens had overwhelming firepower, and Earth's military, though brave, couldn't match the technology of their attackers. The invaders were ruthless, showing no mercy as they raised Earth's defenses. Yet, as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. Humanity began to fight back. It wasn't just the military who stood up to the alien invaders. Ordinary civilians, who had never imagined they would be called to war, began to organize themselves. In every corner of Earth, from the quietest villages to the busiest cities, people took up arms in any way they could. Some joined the military, while others formed resistance groups, using guerrilla tactics to harass the alien invaders. It wasn't a conventional army that rose to fight back. It was humanity itself, united in the face of certain doom. One of the first places to see this unexpected uprising was a small town in the Midwest. The invaders had already taken over the city center, setting up a base where they could launch their attacks on nearby regions. They had no reason to suspect any resistance. The town was small, and the aliens were sure that no one here had the means or the knowledge to fight back. But they were wrong. A group of local residents, farmers, mechanics, and teachers banded together. They had no military training, but they had something far more important: knowledge of their surroundings. They knew the land, the buildings, and the layout of the town better than the aliens could ever hope to. Using their knowledge, they launched a series of surprise attacks against the alien forces. They rigged traps, sabotaged alien equipment, and attacked in small hit-and-run groups. The aliens didn't know how to respond. These humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like survivors, willing to do anything to protect their homes. It wasn't long before word of this unexpected resistance spread across the world. Soon, similar groups began to form everywhere. In large cities, such as New York and Paris, civilians took to the streets with whatever weapons they could find. In Europe, resistance groups began to ambush alien patrols, using their knowledge of the urban terrain to outmaneuver their highly advanced enemies. In Asia, secret underground networks of civilians and soldiers worked together to strike at the invaders from the shadows. The alien forces were initially dismissive of these small rebellions. After all, they had crushed entire planets before. What were a few scattered humans with no real weapons going to do? But as the attacks began to mount, the invaders realized they had underestimated their enemies. Every time they thought they had Earth under control, another group of humans would rise up, forcing them back. One of the most shocking moments came when the alien commander overseeing the Earth invasion gave an order to launch a full-scale assault on one of the major human strongholds. They believed that by completely destroying this base, they would send a message to all humans that resistance was futile. What they didn't know was that this base had been abandoned by the humans as part of a clever ruse. The humans had used the appearance of a full-scale retreat to set up a devastating trap for the alien forces. The trap was sprung as the aliens entered the seemingly empty base. Hidden explosives detonated, sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks. Soldiers who thought they were marching into an easy victory were suddenly faced with total chaos. The human resistance fighters, who had positioned themselves in secret tunnels, attacked from all directions, catching the aliens off guard. The aliens, trained in conventional warfare, were overwhelmed by the guerrilla tactics of the humans. The fight was fierce, and while the humans were outmatched in terms of technology, their sheer determination allowed them to inflict heavy damage on the invaders. The message was clear: humanity was not going to go down without a fight. The aliens were shocked. They had expected to face an easy conquest, but now they were dealing with something entirely different. The human spirit was far stronger than they had imagined, and it was beginning to show in every battle. The more the aliens pushed, the more the resistance grew. The humans were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, working from the shadows, launching attacks when least expected. They didn't have the advanced technology the aliens possessed, but they had the will to survive, and that was something the invaders couldn't account for. The aliens had thought they would easily crush Earth, but they soon learned that humans were a force to be reckoned with. The resistance movement began to spread like wildfire. Resistance leaders, like a man named Captain James Taylor, who had once been a simple farmer, began to emerge. Taylor was one of the first to successfully organize the scattered human forces, using his knowledge of tactics and leadership to rally people from all walks of life. He became a symbol of hope to the people, a living testament to humanity's refusal to give up. By now, the aliens had learned a hard lesson. They were not facing a primitive race of weak beings. They were facing humans who, despite their lack of technology, were willing to fight to the very end. The aliens had underestimated humanity, thinking that their superior technology would easily wipe out the human race. But what they had failed to see was the unbreakable will of humanity. The will to survive, to fight for what was theirs, and to protect their home at all costs. The surprise attacks, the guerrilla tactics, and the unrelenting spirit of humanity had already begun to turn the tide. Earth was far from defeated. The aliens' invasion had just begun, but the resistance had already proven that they would not be an easy target. What the aliens hadn't counted on was that humanity, when pushed to the brink, would become the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen. As the alien forces regrouped and attempted to plan their next move, the humans were already one step ahead, ready to launch the next phase of their resistance. The battle for Earth was only just beginning, and the aliens would soon realize that their biggest mistake was thinking humans were weak. As the days stretched into weeks, the once seemingly unstoppable alien forces began to face unforeseen challenges. The human resistance was not only growing in strength, but also in coordination. What had started as a scattered, disorganized effort was now becoming a well-oiled machine. The alien invaders had initially believed that Earth was ripe for the taking, an easy conquest. But with each passing day, they realized they had made a grave mistake underestimating humanity. The turning point came when a major alien command center located deep within Earth's largest city was successfully infiltrated. The base had been considered impenetrable, heavily fortified with state-of-the-art alien technology. To the invaders, it was a key node in their strategy for total domination. They had relied on its security to communicate, coordinate attacks, and plan their next moves. They never imagined that the humans, using their own resourcefulness and guerrilla tactics, would ever get past the defenses. But it was exactly this overconfidence that allowed the resistance to strike when they were least expected. A group of humans, led by a brilliant strategist named Lieutenant Sarah Williams, had spent weeks studying the alien communication patterns and vulnerabilities in their defense systems. With this information in hand, they made a daring plan to infiltrate the heavily guarded base. Using a mix of stealth technology scavenged from downed alien ships and their deep knowledge of the city's underground tunnels, they managed to slip past the enemy's perimeter. The infiltration was a success, but it wasn't without its challenges. The human fighters faced alien patrols and automated defense systems at every turn. But their knowledge of the terrain, honed from years of living in the urban sprawl, allowed them to navigate through tight spaces and avoid detection. Williams, once a civilian computer engineer, was now leading a team of expert soldiers, each contributing their skills to the mission. Their courage and unity were unmatched, even in the face of danger. They knew what was at stake: the future of Earth itself. Once inside the command center, the humans launched their attack. The battle was fierce. The alien forces, caught by surprise, fought back with everything they had. But the humans were relentless. Using their superior knowledge of their own environment, they outmaneuvered the aliens in the tight, claustrophobic corridors of the command center. Explosions rocked the walls, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. Alien commanders, who had once laughed at the idea of humans posing a real threat, now found themselves scrambling for their lives. What followed was a turning point in the war. The human resistance had managed to breach the core of the alien operations. In the chaos that ensued, Lieutenant Williams and her team were able to access the alien communication systems, which had been previously thought to be secure. They'd broadcast a message to the entire world, a rallying cry for humanity to unite. The message, transmitted through every form of communication available, was simple but powerful. We are not weak. We will fight. The effect was immediate. Across the planet, humans who had been hiding in fear or unsure of how to contribute suddenly found themselves inspired. Resistance groups everywhere sprang into action, motivated by the success of Williams and her team. It was a moment of unity for all of Earth. People from all walks of life, regardless of their backgrounds or nationalities, were now united in the face of a common enemy. But the aliens were not blind to the significance of this event. They quickly realized that the destruction of their command center was not just a tactical loss, it was a psychological one. The humans had shown the invaders that they could not only fight back, but also outsmart them at every turn. The aliens had underestimated the resolve and ingenuity of humankind, and now they were paying the price. In retaliation, the alien forces began to regroup, planning a counteroffensive that would target the human strongholds directly. They launched a series of devastating airstrikes on the major resistance bases, hoping to crush the human spirit once and for all. But even in the face of such overwhelming force, humanity did not back down. Lieutenant Williams, now a symbol of hope for the resistance, coordinated counterattacks with the remaining forces. Despite the aliens' superior firepower, the human resistance continued to defy expectations. They used everything at their disposal: scavenged weapons, makeshift armor, and their knowledge of Earth's terrain to keep the alien invaders on the defensive. The balance of power had shifted. The fighting was intense, and the losses were heavy. Entire cities fell, and many brave soldiers sacrificed their lives. But each loss only strengthened the resolve of humanity. They fought not just for survival, but for their freedom, their homes, and their future. The aliens, who had once assumed Earth was an easy conquest, were now in a fight for their lives. One of the most notable moments of the conflict came when a group of alien ships, sent to launch a final devastating blow against Earth's defenses, found themselves ambushed in deep space. The humans, using a combination of old Earth naval tactics and newly developed countermeasures, managed to set a trap. Alien ships were disabled, and several key commanders were captured. This victory sent shockwaves through the alien ranks. For the first time, the invaders realized they weren't facing a weak, defenseless species. They were facing a race that would fight tooth and nail for every inch of their planet. As the resistance continued to grow and alien forces began to falter, hope surged across the world. Earth was far from defeated. The humans had found their strength, and with each battle, they gained more confidence. The alien invaders, once so certain of their victory, were now fighting for survival in a war they had never anticipated. The tide of the war was shifting. The aliens had underestimated the power of humanity's resilience, and now they were about to face the full force of a world united in its defense. What had started as an invasion for conquest had turned into a battle for survival, one that the aliens would soon learn they could not win. The war had reached a critical point. Humanity, having gained strength from their initial victories, now faced the alien invaders head-on in what was shaping up to be the final battle for Earth's future. It was clear that the aliens had underestimated human resilience and ingenuity, but they were far from ready to give up. The alien forces had regrouped and unleashed their most formidable weapons yet, supreme technological innovations, and overwhelming firepower. But despite this, the humans were determined to hold their ground, knowing this would be their last chance to secure a future for themselves and their children. Lieutenant Sarah Williams stood in the command center, her gaze fixed on the holographic maps that displayed the locations of both human and alien forces. Her mind raced, calculating the next moves, anticipating the enemy's every action. The young officer had come a long way since the early days of the invasion. What was once a ragtag band of resistance fighters was now a professional, unified military force capable of taking on the aliens head-to-head. The tide had turned, but the final blow still had to be delivered. In the last few days, the aliens had escalated their attacks, focusing on the remaining strongholds of human resistance across the globe. Major cities were now reduced to ruins, and entire populations had been displaced. But it wasn't the cities that mattered now. It was the heart of humanity's military operations. If the aliens could strike at the core of the human resistance, they would win. If the humans could hold their ground and defeat the invaders, they would secure Earth's future. The aliens had launched their most ambitious assault yet, an armada of massive warships equipped with devastating weapons capable of wiping out entire regions with a single strike. The plan was simple: destroy the remaining human strongholds in one decisive blow. With Earth's last line of defense poised for destruction, the stakes had never been higher. But what the aliens didn't count on was the ingenuity of the human fighters. Lieutenant Williams, along with a small group of strategic advisors, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They knew the enemy's technology better than the aliens realized, and they had come up with a daring plan to disable the Armada. The key was a weak spot in the alien warship's hyperdrive systems, a flaw that had been overlooked during the initial invasion. If the humans could exploit this flaw, they might be able to turn the tide of the battle once and for all. The operation, codenamed Operation Scorched Earth, was risky. It required a small, specialized team to infiltrate the alien flagship, the largest and most heavily protected vessel in the Armada. The team would have to disable the hyperdrive, cutting the alien fleet off from reinforcements and trapping them in Earth's atmosphere. It was a suicide mission for most of the volunteers, but the prospect of saving their planet was enough to give them the courage to fight. Lieutenant Williams was among the first to volunteer. Despite the weight of command, she knew she couldn't ask her team to do something she wasn't willing to do herself. She led the mission with a fierce determination that inspired the other soldiers. There was no turning back now. The team boarded the alien flagship under the cover of darkness, using cloaking technology to evade detection. The stealth operation was running smoothly, but the closer they got to the heart of the ship, the more dangerous it became. Alien sentries patrolled the corridors, and the ship's internal defenses were more sophisticated than anything the humans had ever encountered. But the humans pressed on, knowing that failure wasn't an option. Inside the flagship's central control room, the human team finally reached the hyperdrive core. It was heavily guarded, but with careful planning and impeccable timing, they took down the alien soldiers before they could trigger an alarm. Lieutenant Williams and her team worked quickly, planting explosive charges around the core. The entire room hummed with tension, every second bringing them closer to their goal and their potential doom. As they set the final charge, an alien commander appeared from the shadows. The creature was tall, its face covered with a gleaming metallic helmet that concealed any emotion. It was a warrior, one of the top commanders sent to lead the final assault on Earth. The alien spoke in its harsh, guttural language, but Williams understood the intent in its eyes. This was the moment when both sides would collide head-on, with the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. The fight was brutal. The human soldiers fought with a desperation and fury that came from knowing they were the last line of defense. Each blow they landed against the alien soldiers was a small victory, but it was the final act of sabotage that would decide the outcome of the war. Williams, despite the odds, managed to plant the final charge on the hyperdrive core. But before she could escape, the alien commander lunged at her, a massive weapon in its hands. Time seemed to slow as they grappled, both sides knowing that the explosion would soon trigger. In a desperate final move, Williams reached for the detonator she had kept hidden, pressing the button just as the commander struck her with a blow that knocked her to the floor. The explosion rocked the flagship, sending shockwaves through the alien armada. The human team barely escaped the blast, using their cloaking technology to make their way back to their extraction point. As the flagship exploded in the distance, the alien fleet was thrown into disarray. Their hyperdrive systems were down, and they were now stranded in Earth's atmosphere. The aliens had lost their advantage. The victory was not without sacrifice. Many brave soldiers, including Williams' team, had given their lives for this moment, but their sacrifice had secured Earth's future. The alien forces, now stranded and vulnerable, were picked apart by Earth's remaining forces. The aliens had thought they were unstoppable, but they had underestimated humanity's capacity for resilience, sacrifice, and ingenuity. In the days that followed, the alien invaders began to retreat. The humans, though battered and broken, had won. Earth had been saved, not through overwhelming firepower or superior technology, but through the strength of human will and determination. The aliens, once so confident in their superiority, were forced to flee, forever haunted by the terror they had unleashed on a planet they had underestimated. Humanity had proven to the invaders, and to themselves, that they would never be a species to be underestimated again. The war had ended, and Earth had emerged victorious. The battle was over. The fires of war, though still smoldering in some places, had subsided. Earth had been saved, but the cost had been immense. The world was forever changed, scared by the brutal conflict that had nearly torn it apart. The alien invaders, once so sure of their superiority, now fled the planet in disarray, leaving behind a battered and broken Earth. But it wasn't just the planet that had been changed. Humanity itself had undergone a transformation. The victory was hard-won, but it was also a turning point, an affirmation of the strength that had always existed within humans, even if they hadn't realized it. Lieutenant Sarah Williams stood on a hill overlooking what was once the site of the final battle. The air was still thick with the smoke from the explosion that had destroyed the alien flagship, sending ripples throughout the entire alien fleet. The land was scared, with massive craters marking the locations where the most intense fighting had taken place. But despite the devastation, there was a sense of calm now, a sense that the worst had passed. The alien invaders were gone, and humanity had proven that they would never be an easy target again. Williams gazed at the horizon, her thoughts drifting back to the final moments of the battle. She had been there, in the thick of it, facing down the alien commander who had nearly claimed her life. But she had survived, and in doing so, had secured the future of the planet. The sacrifice of so many brave soldiers, her team, her comrades, her friends, had not been in vain. Their deaths had not been meaningless. They had won Earth's freedom, and that was something that would never be forgotten. In the weeks following the victory, Earth began to heal. The human resistance, now bolstered by a new sense of unity and purpose, began the task of rebuilding. Nations that had once been divided by borders, ideologies, and conflicts now worked together toward a common goal: restoring the planet and ensuring that no force, alien or otherwise, would ever threaten them again. The war had taught humanity something valuable, something that had always been there, but had been buried beneath the surface. Their strength, their will to fight, and their ability to endure against the most overwhelming odds. The leadership of Earth's new global government reached out to other star systems, sending out messages of peace and cooperation. The aliens who had once thought themselves to be the masters of the universe were now a scattered, broken species, their empire crumbling in the wake of their failed invasion. The message that humanity sent to them was clear. Earth would not be intimidated, and any future attempts to conquer the planet would be met with fierce resistance. But it wasn't just the threat of war that had changed. Humanity's view of itself had shifted as well. They had been forced to confront their own limitations, and in doing so, had discovered untapped strengths. They had been underestimated by the aliens, but they had proven time and time again that they were a force to be reckoned with. They were not just survivors. They were warriors, innovators, and leaders. And the galaxy would soon learn to respect them. In the years that followed, the human race flourished. Advances in technology, spurred on by the need to defend against the alien threat, were now used to benefit the planet. New industries arose, and humanity's reach extended beyond Earth. Colonies were established on the Moon and Mars, and exploration missions to distant star systems began. Earth had become a beacon of hope and strength in the galaxy. What had once been a planet on the brink of destruction was now a thriving, vibrant world, leading the charge into the unknown. Sarah Williams, now a decorated hero, stood at the forefront of this new age. She had been promoted to a position of great responsibility, overseeing the Earth's defense forces and leading the effort to ensure the planet's continued safety. But despite her newfound fame and power, she remained humble. She knew that the victory had not been hers alone. It had been the victory of all the brave men and women who had fought beside her. It had been the victory of humanity itself. One day, as she stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, looking out at the stars, she thought about the future. The universe was vast, and humanity had only just begun to scratch the surface of what was out there. The threat of alien invaders may have been quelled for now, but who knew what other dangers lay beyond the stars? Would humanity's newfound strength be enough to face whatever challenges awaited them? As Sarah looked out at the endless expanse of space, she knew one thing for sure. Humanity had learned its lesson. They were no longer the weak, defenseless species the aliens had once thought them to be. Earth had been tested in the fire of war, and it had emerged stronger, united, and more determined than ever before. The legacy of that war would never be forgotten. It would live on in the hearts of every human who had fought, who had sacrificed, and who had stood together against a common enemy. The message to the galaxy was clear. Earth was no longer a target, and humanity would never be underestimated again. With that thought in mind, Sarah Williams turned away from the stars and looked toward the future, toward a future where humanity would continue to thrive, grow, and explore the galaxy with the same courage and determination that had saved their world. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, knowing that they were capable of achieving anything they set their minds to. And as the ship sailed onward into the cosmos, Earth's legacy was just beginning to unfold.